I don't think we've got there actually.
No, because the focus was really the extent to which these forms were protected by copyright. We went a little bit into looking at the ways, as I said, who gets the income from exploitation of copyright, sort of your singer-songwriters as opposed to your performers' rights and the differences that you have there in income streams. But we didn't go really any, sort of further. We were on the first step before we were going to the exploitation, and because, sort of the evidence was rather, A, it's not an incentive, and B, it's not really that important for us. And Steve Beresford at one point said, well, we all signed the PRS form anyway, we'll just deal with it that way, which I thought was absolutely lovely, a really good example of the collective nature of the production. So it wasn't our intention at that point to look at exploitation, but it's a lovely idea, this is maybe something that, should that's important, that should come out of here, that we should be doing. Yourself?
Well, I am a little bit interested in this notion of investments that we heard here before, and I think this is interesting because, Tamara, when you were talking here, you talked from the perspective of operating, shall we say, a group of people as a company. And I just want to relate that to my experience within, my realm of performance, of the performance world, which very rarely sees such stable formations of people. It is more project-based, and for instance, my company, Space Engineering, in a sense, you could say that Space Engineering is my artist name. It's not really a well-defined group of people, but it changes depending on the project. So I just wonder, this idea of investment, I can see here that it could be an investment into a company as such, involving many people, but in the performance realm, where is the investment, really, if we look at it as an investment?
You're looking to me?
I think so, yeah. But it's an open question, but I thought you mentioned the investment.
Usually when I open my mouth, it costs me money. I think that we have to move away from the model of funding that the public bodies have been associated with. I mean, government is a public funder. Local government services are publicly funded. But I'd like to think that what we do, and particularly within the realm I operate, which isn't exclusively now music, it's also very much intellectual property, and those people that know me in a former life, particularly John and Martin, will know why I'm particularly interested in the exploitation of copyright to the benefit of the creator. Whether there's a third party involved or not, that doesn't worry me so much, as long as you get it right at day one, and so many artists don't. That's why the exploitation is wrong. And that's better now in the world that Tamara is describing, because you don't need a label. A manager is good, but not always essential. It's essential at some point, at the point that Belle and Sebastian are at, and they are there because of the creativity as much of John as a manager. U2's royalties, it's the story that's always trotted out, but it's the right one. Their royalties are still split 5 ways, and there are only 4 people in the band, so you work out how that operates, and it's operated that way from day one, and it's still operating that way. And there are many, many other examples, not just in music, but also in literature and in dance, indeed. So I see that the money, which of course is taxpayers' money, which we have to account for to our paymasters, otherwise we're in trouble, is an investment in the creativity itself, if it's an organisation, and an individual in their career development. It's not a one-off projects, we still do quite a lot of, but I'm always looking at where are you going to be in 5 to 10 years, not what this project looks like when it is completed or when it's realised, what it's left behind long term as a benefit of this project, whether it's to the individual creator who has devised, run and delivered the project, or to the community which it is based in and serves, or that bigger picture for me, what the economic value. And politicians, careful what I say now, but politicians regularly trot out that maxim that this has an economic benefit to our creative development of this nation. And Scotland is a very creative nation. We're all sitting at this table because we know that to be the case. But the investment is in that long-term future of the individual, of the organisation, and longer term even, maybe even to the benefit of the economic return that comes back to Scotland. And the last thing I would say is that the exploitation bit, it's a word that I use probably too much, the exploitation of the content is the key element for me. The legacy element is keeping as much of that content ownership, whatever it's applied to, in Scotland, under licence to a third party, as long as you control that licence to a degree. Fine. But that's the continuing battle to keep more of that content ownership here, which then brings the economic benefit. It doesn't come any other way.
Ronan?
Yeah, management and exploitation of rights for creative individuals, I think, is really key. And I'm primarily a copyright historian, so I'm going to offer you a historical parallel. There was a proposal for a bill in 1737, which incidentally would have been the first Copyright Act to protect music in the UK. It didn't make it onto the statute books, and the reason it didn't make it onto the statute books was because it had a clause that said no author could assign his or her rights to a third party for any longer than a 10-year period of time, and it would revert. And the booksellers obviously didn't like that. The people who initially started lobbying. And it seemed, I mean, from my perspective, had something like that made it onto the books in the 18th century, we'd be talking about a very different copyright regime in the UK today. And it's one that would have done tremendous good for authors and artists and creators, and introduced a certain parity of experience and bargaining position within an industry, you know, broadly speaking, in which, as we've said, 95% of people struggle to make a living out of doing what they do best.
Do the artists wish to come in? No. I'm just wondering if some of these difficulties around around managing a creative business, thinking about how the copyright regime or the wider policy regime could be adjusted to assist. Maybe it's not something that can be addressed through public policy or through interventions, public investments, public money, because it simply reflects the fact that it's a winner-takes-all kind of industry. So the large organisations that can operate portfolio strategies are, you know, bound to be better placed to be able to do cross-subsidisation, etc., that you simply cannot do as you call yourself as a DIY creative, and maybe that's just the nature of the industry. Or do we think that policy can
in terms of copyright? Or
yes, that it's simply how the industry is.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of copyright, I know my rights, and I write all the songs, but I give cuts to my band members depending on how long they've been in the band, how much I feel they've given to the project, because there's no other way to give them any money or pay them anything. I don't really see any change in policy actually affecting me as an artist. I think it's probably different for dance actually, because I think the situations we were talking about in terms of who's choreographed something and who's dancing it. In terms of music, it's split. You know, if you write the song, if you write the music or the instrumentation, you write the lyrics, the melodies, everyone understands what cut they're meant to get. And also when I co-write with people, I session sing as well, sometimes, and a lot of times with friends. But as you talked about the ethics of copyright, often I'll do a session, I'll get paid for a session, and then they'll come back to me and say, oh, we're giving you this or we're giving you that, just because we're good friends, we've worked together, or just because they think I've given something extra to that track. In terms of securing my own copyright, and I think that actually a lot of artists aren't aware of their copyright, and a lot of people don't even register with PRS, and a lot of musicians don't care to know much about the business, they just want to write music. But if you are running your own label, or you actually want to succeed, you can understand that from writing a song there's money to be gained from just performing it. And there's PPL as well, which is the performance on the recording. Yes. So people that perform on the recording are also they should be registered on PPL, and they're given a cut.
VPL.
Yeah, the visual. And that should all be registered, and you can register on an online portal, and everyone that's performed. Though, for example, one of the songs that I performed on that was in Scream in cinemas worldwide. I think I got £60 recently, so it's not a huge amount of money there, but I'm sure other acts get more than us.
Okay, we have a couple of interventions lining up.